Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. I am your host, Casey Phillips. I'm the communications specialist here at the Aquarium. Today we brought in a special guest, Tanisha La Guardia. Tanisha, you are our ambassador animal coordinator here at the Aquarium.
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
So tell everyone your origin story. How did you get started working here?
Yes, so I work mostly with our ambassador animals here at the aquarium, which those are the animals that go out on program for outreach, or sometimes if you see an animal out on the floor, like in the Delta Swamp, you'll see an educator with an animal in their hand. Those are our ambassador animals. But I got into this about 10 years ago where I never really would have thought that I would have been interested in ever having a reptile in my life. I had a daughter at the time, and she saw a friend that had a little leopard gecko, and she thought she wanted one too. So I went out and impulsively bought a leopard gecko. Don't do that. Do your research before buying any kind of animal. But we got her one, and whenever we got her to the house, my daughter was absolutely terrified of it. So guess who had to be the one to take care of this animal?
Mama got to step in.
Mama had to step in. So whenever I decided to take care of this animal, I just absolutely fell in love with it. It was the cutest little animal. Never experienced anything like this. I was a dog and cat person. And so this was a whole new experience. And seeing that this scaly little animal actually had a little personality and was very cute and wanted my attention, I just fell in love. And so within 6 months or so, I ended up with a second leopard gecko. And then this same daughter came up to me and said that she wants a snake now. And so she actually went out and bought it herself, and she had the snake, and guess what? The same thing happened.
What kind of snake was it?
It was a ball python.
A ball python. Oh, so pretty big snake then.
It was a baby. So it was no bigger than the palm of my hand whenever we got it home. But again, she was scared of it and
didn't learn her lesson.
Did not learn her lesson. Obviously, I didn't either with letting her get this animal.
How old was she at the time?
She was about 9 at the time. So I ended up taking care of this snake. And honestly, I was very terrified of it. I wasn't as scared of the leopard gecko, but...
Well, leopard geckos they're pretty lovable.
They are. They have a cute little face, and
little
they're
fat
adorable.
tail.
Yeah. And it was a baby as well, so it was not intimidating at all. But the snake was a little bit more difficult for me to get used to. I was holding it with gloves, and it was not a good first experience. But finally one day I just dove in and just picked up this snake and realized it was super cool, and it just sat in my hand. I like to call it a pet rock because ball pythons tend to just ball up in your hand and do absolutely nothing. So they're super cool. But then as time went on, I wanted to learn more about them. I wanted to learn more about reptiles. And I was a medical student. So my dream was to be a nurse midwife or a home birth midwife. But then as I learned more about the reptiles, I was like, I really want to be around people that like these animals, because everybody in my life thought I was crazy. They're like, why do you have that thing in your house? This is not normal.
So they shared your aversion to reptiles in general, or to snakes in particular?
Reptiles in general. They thought they were just creepy, pretty much all my friends, my family. So I didn't really have anybody to teach me more about these animals and to talk about them and to be excited about them with. I just happened to be scrolling through my Facebook and saw that Tennessee Aquarium was needing volunteers. So I was thinking, I think I've seen a reptile or two at the Tennessee Aquarium when I went to visit.
We have a couple.
Yeah, we have a few. So I decided to just put in an application, and it was funny because nowhere on the application that I knew of specifically said anything about reptiles, but it had an other box, and then it had like a comment section. And so I put the other, and I put in all capital letters, anything with reptiles, ! So I really wasn't expecting a call back anytime soon, but literally within less than a week, I got a call back. They took me to, at the time, what was called a wet lab. And so this was where they kept the ambassador animals.
It's the home for all of our ambassador animals.
It's the home for all of our ambassadors. So I go in there and you say home, and I was like, this is my home at this point. Like, I love it in here. It has everything that I could dream of, being around and learning about.
I've always thought they should call it the embassy, since it's where all the ambassadors live.
Yes.
It's called our embassy.
Yeah, the embassy. I like that. So I got in there, and Susie Grant was over the room at the time, and so I talked
Susie's
with her.
Our former lead educator?
I believe that was her title.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I was a volunteer for maybe almost a year at the time, and Susie came up to me and said, we have really great fellowships here, and I think that you should be a part of it. And
this is where I think I met you.
Yes,
Was as a fellow.
Yes, I think so. And she said the only thing is that you need to be in school to be able to do it. So here I am in my almost mid-30s and had no desire to go back to school at all. But the fellowship sounded really good. It sounded like something that I wanted to try and to experience. I had 4 kids. I was a single mom at the time. So I went back to school for wildlife and conservation. And I did a semester before I started my fellowship here at the Tennessee Aquarium.
It's like another brave move then. The first brave move, I guess, would be learning to love snakes that you were afraid of before, and then to turn your life around and kind of, turn it upside down, I guess, in your mid-30s.
Yeah. I did a whole career change because, like I said, I wanted to deliver babies. Very different. And actually, I did have an experience there with a penguin that hatched that year. So I still get to see the babies, too. They're just a little different kind of baby. My main focus for the fellowship was to help with the penguins. So I got to have a broader range of things to work with for husbandry, or while I was in husbandry. I did the penguins. I was around. I took care of the lemurs, or I helped to learn their diets and feed them. The otters as well. So I had a pretty wide variety of new animals that I thought I would never have imagined in my life to be working with. But of course, I also helped with the turtles and the snakes that we have here as well, and different reptiles and amphibians also. So I pretty much got to dip my toe all over the aquarium that year. It was pretty great.
So you were a fellow in 2019. At what point did you become a full-time employee?
After my fellowship, at the end of 2019, I was actually hired on as a part-time educator just a few months later. So I was able to do part-time education. I started that December 2019. But then we all know what happened in 2020. So unfortunately, I was not able to continue to be the part-time educator during that time. However, I was still able to volunteer. So I came in multiple days a week throughout the 2020 pandemic to be able to help everyone, because it was a rough time, obviously, for everyone.
Really rough time.
It was very rough. So I came in anytime I could to help with animal care, because that's what was the biggest blessing about doing my fellowship, was that I was able to help in many different ways. So not just reptiles, but I knew how to help with otters. I knew how to help with lemurs, and I knew how to help with the penguins. So I was able to go all over the place to lend a hand where it was needed. After everything kind of calmed down from the pandemic, that's whenever I got the call to be a full-time educator. So we had community engagement educators at the time. And that's how I got hired full-time to be able to do that, in which we mostly did outreach. And then within a year, January of 2022, I was promoted to the ambassador animal coordinator.
So that's 2 years now that you've had this role then?
Yes.
I'd like to go back to 10 years ago. When you said that you had this aversion to reptiles, what was that first moment like when you sort of overcame that fear and let yourself experience reptiles in a way that wasn't affected by whatever preconceptions you had?
So I did a lot of research, and I came across a YouTuber by the name of Brian Barczyk, and unfortunately he passed away this year. But during that time of learning and trying to figure out how to handle these animals, just watching his YouTube and his passion really warmed my heart. When people think of a reptile, they think of like an evil animal. They get scared, or I'll say more like a snake, for instance, or even lizards. People don't really care for lizards. People do love turtles.
There's a lot of cultural instruction that affects and colors people's perceptions of reptiles, I think it's safe to say.
Yes, they have a bad reputation. But seeing how he handled these animals, seeing how majestic they are, and even just learning how great they are for our ecosystem and how much we need these animals around, because the balance would be very off if we didn't have these animals here for us to take care of our ecosystem. It just gave me such a big passion to spread the word. Like, I want everybody to know that snakes are not scary. They're actually very helpful. They're very friendly animals. Yes, we have some snakes that might have a little attitude, but people have attitudes.
Dogs have attitudes.
Dogs definitely have attitudes. And so it's just learning them, learning their purpose, learning the reason why they're here, that really softened my heart to them. And just holding that animal in my hand and just watching them move around and just seeing that there's nothing harmful about them. They're just another amazing creature that's here to serve like the rest of us.
I remember being pretty amazed when you first told me that you used to have this deep-seated aversion to reptiles, because I think my only interaction with you to that point had been you frequently with a snake like draped across your shoulders or crawling up your arm. So I just assumed that it was something that you'd always been a fan of. It's interesting that someone can so completely flip the script on their likes and dislikes.
Right, yeah, because, I mean, like I said, 10 years ago, I would have never pictured myself in this position, but it's just all about educating yourself. A lot of people fear things that they don't know. And so once you educate yourself about something and realize this really isn't that bad, then you can start appreciating it so much more. And you don't have to love it like I do. You don't have to fall in love with them and have them draped over your shoulders and hold them, but at least respect that animal enough to say, you deserve to be here. I don't need to be afraid of you. You're just another animal, just like my dog or my cat.
Yeah, as some of our scientists would say, they're just kind of another brick in the wall.
Right.
So I have kind of a similar aversion to spiders, I guess. And I had to come to a similar conclusion about them, that as much as I might not want one climbing up my arm, I still very much respect their role in the ecosystem and the important part they play in, pest control, all those things. So.
Right, yeah.
So when you take a snake out or a lizard, do you find that you have a lot of people who have a similar distaste to them that you used to have? And is it nice to be the first person to expose them to it in a healthy and positive way?
Yes. One of my favorite stories or favorite moments as an educator, it was an evening event that we had, not too long, maybe a little over a year ago. And we had this lady there, and she was a hoot. She was so funny. And I had one of our larger snakes, our red-tail boa, and he's probably around 7-8 foot. He weighs about 20 pounds, so he's a big guy. And so I had him out with my colleague Lindsay, and we just kind of let people come to us in those moments. We don't want to just shove an animal into their face or anything like that. So they come to us, and this lady came, and she stood a few feet away, and she said, "Tell me why I should like this animal." And I said,
did you just like roll up your sleeves excited to
I was like, all right,
get
let's
the
go.
elevator pitch?
Hold my drink. But no, I just looked at her. I said, well, one, just look at his face. Like, he's got that puppy face and a mustache. It's great. It's great. But I said, but a snake like this is so helpful for our ecosystem. People think a snake this big will size you up and they're just thinking about eating you. I said, do you smell like a rodent right now? And she's like, no.
I hope not.
Yeah, hope not. But she said, no. I said, well, as long as you're not a rodent, they're not going to be wanting you for dinner or anything like that. But I said, but also, because of the fact that they love rodents they cause more damage to our ecosystem and to us as people and our animals than the snake ever could. And I, give my rodent spill. Like, they carry diseases that can harm us and our animals. They're one of the leading causes of house fires that damage our homes with like chewing holes in our walls and wires and things like that. And I said, and a snake like this helps take care of that and takes care of that rodent population that could harm us. And I said, do you like pizza? She's like, yeah, I love pizza. And I said, well, the snake take care of the rodents that like to go out in the fields and eat all of our crops. They like to eat the tomatoes that go on a pizza. They love to eat the peppers that go on a pizza and all the grain and everything that makes the bread that goes on a pizza. So if we didn't have rodent control, then we wouldn't have pizza today. And so I said, I'm holding this big snake. I said, I would not put myself in danger. And I had the head in my hand. I said, I don't have animals that could hurt you or hurt me. And I said, this animal knows what to do. He's been trained. We go through a process with our ambassador animals before they even go out to make sure that they feel comfortable with people, that they're okay with being touched, because most of our ambassadors are touch animals. Some of them are not, but a lot of them are. And so even our animals go through a training before we bring them out to you to interact with them. And I said, I make sure that everybody's in a safe environment, including the animal. The animal is my number one top priority. And so I want to make sure that he's not feeling endangered to where he has to protect himself. The more I talked and, the more I gave her information about this animal, she just kind of kept inching up closer and closer to the point where we put the tail in her hand and she was holding it. She said, I love this snake. I love him. And so that was the highlight of my night of probably that whole year, just because she was terrified. But she asked me, she said, why should I love this animal? And I just gave her every fact that I could think of. By the end, we had a circle of people listening in and watching this snake, and everybody at least touched it and wanted to interact with it and appreciated the snake as they walked away.
I mean, good for her for being so open to letting her preconceptions be sort of blown up.
Right. Yeah, I was proud of her by the end of the night.
That is not something that most people are willing to do, to be receptive to alternative viewpoints. I mentioned earlier that I think a lot of our interactions with or our thoughts about different kinds of animals are really colored by the things that we're taught as young people, which is how I try and approach interacting with animals with my kids, not passing on whatever fear or aversion I have to them, but letting them figure out how they feel about the animal.
Right. It's interesting because I have 4 kids, and so the older 2 were not raised around reptiles until my second oldest decided that she wanted one, and then the younger 2 were raised around them. And so especially my youngest, she's 11 now, but she's been helping me feed snakes since she was about 3.
I was going to ask you if that had changed the oldest one's opinion about snakes.
It has. I mean, they're still a little apprehensive. They're not like the younger 2 that'll just reach in and grab one, but they've learned to love them and they see that I love them. They see that as my passion, because at the beginning, whenever I would bring a new reptile in, because I have several at home, they would say, Mom, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? Why do you keep doing this? But now they just know that it's just another animal in the house. It's no big deal. So they've learned to respect them too.
So let's talk about the Ambassador Animal Program here at the aquarium. We've touched on a couple of species that you have, but give people some examples of the other animals that you care for.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different type of mammals. We have our lesser Madagascar hedgehog, Tenrex. That's a very long name, so we just call them Tenrex.
Which are adorable.
They're so adorable. That's a fan favorite. People love them. Then we have our flying squirrels. Those tend to stay on campus. They don't really go off campus anywhere, but we do have camps that come, or we have field trips that come in. And so sometimes we'll bring the squirrels out and we can watch them fly like a flying squirrel, which is really fun. We also have marine inverts. So that would be like our sea stars, our jellyfish, sea urchins. You mentioned spiders. We do have tarantulas. We have Madagascar hissing cockroaches, and we have millipedes as well. So we do have a pretty wide variety. We also have Bubba, who is a barred owl that we bring out every now and then.
Bubba is also one of my favorites.
Yes, I love Bubba. My goal whenever I came in as the ambassador coordinator, I wanted to revamp the living spaces and the homes of all of our ambassadors to just make sure that they're comfortable, because these animals, they go out and work for us every single day. So they're going out, they're being touched by people, they have to travel, they have to go all over the place like we do. And so whenever we get off work, we want to go in our nice, warm, cozy homes. And that's how I feel about our animals. I want them to come home to a nice home that they are comfortable in. Because when you have a happy animal, when you have a relaxed animal, you have an animal that's going to want to go out and be a part of programs.
So the wanting to be out is actually, I think, one of the most important aspects of our animal programming. So when you do come to the aquarium and you see an animal on the floor, that animal, there's a process of determining whether or not that animal wants to work that day, right? So
right.
Walk people through the checklist of things that you kind of look at to gauge whether or not one of our ambassador animals wants to participate in programming.
It depends on, of course, the type of animal and the species. So for instance, for a tenrex, because they're mammals, they tend to have more body language and to show you a little bit better on what kind of mood they're in. So if a tenrec is kind of balled up, it's not seeming like she's wanting to be out and about by her body language, then we give an animal the choice to come out, especially ones that understand commands. We actually have a snake. His name is Oreo. And even though he's a snake, we can just stick our hand out. And if he wants to be bothered with us, he will crawl into our hands. If not, we could tell by the body language that he's given us that he's not feeling it today. And so we do not force any animal to come out.
And that's because we want any participation in programming to be a positive interaction for them. Their well-being comes first.
Yes, absolutely.
And as you mentioned earlier, they are our colleagues. So you wouldn't want to force one of your colleagues to take part in something if they were feeling sick or weren't into it. You'd want to make sure that they were comfortable with it too.
Yes, of course.
Why do you think that it's important that the aquarium has a program like this, like the Ambassador Animal Program? How does it benefit us and amplify our outreach capabilities to have these animals working with us?
Yeah, so for opportunity, most people really don't even know what's going on in their backyards. They don't know that they have millipedes in their backyard hanging out under a rock, or they think that every snake they see is a venomous snake. And so it's important to me to give them all the information we need to minimize fear, but also to appreciate what they have, whether it's right here in our backyards here in Tennessee or somewhere in Africa where they can come across a ball python.
And there's something about the circumstances under which you're able to interact with these animals. Somebody like you is there, or your colleague Lindsay is there to curate that experience for them in a way that makes everyone, you, the animal, and the guest feel safe and in control.
Right. So you're able to touch that animal. You're able to feel, a lot of people think that snakes are slimy. You're able to feel that a snake really isn't slimy. They actually, I like to say, they feel like a water hose. And they're very interesting to feel and to feel their muscles in their body. Or with marine animals, you might see a horseshoe crab washed up on the shore, but here we have horseshoe crabs that you can flip over and see all their cool legs and be able to touch their shell on their backs and things, and learning about how they see, how they eat, just different things about that animal that you really wouldn't learn otherwise.
Tanisha, what's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part is actually the diversity of the animals that I work with, from with birds all the way down to insects. And so to be able to learn about everything and that I can, and to be able to show that to our guests and to our community, it's rewarding because, like we've talked about earlier, I was scared because nobody told me about these animals. But somebody taught me how to understand these animals. And so I love being that person to new guests and new people that come around us.
Spreading the good word.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap up today's episode of the podcast with Tanisha and talking about our Ambassador Animal Program here at the aquarium with that. And hopefully we'll have a chance to bring in more people to talk about the many varied paths that bring people on our staff to working in the River Journey and Ocean Journey buildings. But thanks so much for your time, Tanisha.
All right. Thank you.
If you have an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, or just a question for an expert like Tanisha, send your suggestion or your question to podcast@tnaqua.org.